Well, welcome to Midweek Experiments in Faithfulness. This is a weekly facilitated spiritual practice with a Quaker flavor and an experimental ethos. My name is Jen Higgins-Newman, and I'm the program manager at Beacon Hill Friends House, a Quaker Center for Learning in Action and a residential community of about 20 people who live according to Quaker values. Tonight, we have Sue Penn with Poetically Magical Moments. Poetry shows us things that are, at the same time, both familiar and new. It can inspire us even as it breaks our hearts. It can comfort us when nothing is comfortable. In this practice tonight, we will read several poems together, consider what they say to us, what they evoke in us, how perhaps they inspire us. This won't be a classroom to learn poetry. Instead, it will be a kind of worship sharing where the poets have been invited to speak to us as equals. Sue has chosen the poets with an eye toward comfort and positive inspiration, and with an emphasis on poets who are people of color, LGBTQ, and working class. Now, I'm excited to introduce you to Sue. Sue Penn is a Midwestern Quaker and poetry enthusiast whose poetry workshops at Friends General Conference Gathering, New England Yearly Meeting, and elsewhere have been described as magical. She attends Red Cedar Monthly Meeting in Lansing, Michigan. So again, welcome. We're happy that you've joined us, and Sue, it's all yours.
That description I wrote sounds really intimidating to me now that I'm actually here getting ready to do some poetry with you. I had such a hard time choosing the poems. I had about 2 hours worth of poems I love that one after another I just had to delete and to try and keep things appropriate for the amount of time we have and the kind of space that we have. And I think when I initially wrote the description, I had this idea that I would come up with something really clever as a practice, and that didn't happen. So I'm gonna talk about the poetry more than I like to. In face-to-face stuff, I like to get other people talking, and people do. And usually we read the poetry together rather than me reading it. So I'm kind of trying to get used to how this works on Zoom. Let's see. Let us just start with some poetry. I'm going to share my screen. I chose this. This is just 4 lines from a much longer poem. It's the beginning of it. And I like the whole poem, but I just wanted to pull these 4 lines out as kind of an epigraph for what we're doing, because I love it so much. Which are the magic moments in ordinary time? All of them, for those who can see. And I chose this theme because, and I don't want to dwell too much on our troubles, but we all have troubles right now. We have the ordinary troubles that come up in your personal life, your family life, your work life, and then of course we have political and social troubles, economic troubles, and of course a pandemic. And I wanted to read some poetry that would kind of remind us and inspire us to pay attention to what, you know what, I'm going to let the poetry say what you're paying attention to. I don't need to explain that. The poetry is here to do that. So the first poem I want to read is, hang on, let me just get what I want. This is Czesław Miłosz, a Polish poet, in case the name didn't make it obvious, and a short poem called Encounter that all this poetry is here because I love it. So I'm going to keep saying, I just love this poem, and you might not love it. It might not speak to you, and that's okay. But I'm sharing it because I love it. I have often really struggled to describe who I am and what I do. And I sort of have figured out in recent years that what I am is an enthusiast, that I put that in my intro. And whenever I find something I like, the first thing I want to do is run and show it to somebody else. So that's mostly what I'm doing is, look, I love these poems. Let me show them to you. We were riding through frozen fields in a wagon at dawn. A red wing rose in the darkness, and suddenly a hare ran across the road. One of us pointed to it with his hand. That was long ago. Today, neither of them is alive, not the hare, nor the man who made the gesture. Oh, my love, where are they? Where are they going? The flash of a hand, streak of movement, rustle of pebbles. I ask, not out of sorrow, but in wonder. I love the gentleness of this poem. I love the idea that for the poet, this memory of this ordinary moment when a hare ran across the road early in the morning, just enough of that, just that memory of that and being with someone, whoever he was, the man who made the gesture, which might have been the poet. He says one of us pointed to it with his hand. That just the memory of that moment can evoke in him this capacity for wonder. It's a very small thing. I am going to let this poem speak for itself. I'm not going to try to say a whole bunch of stuff about a very short poem that's easy to understand. But I hope it maybe will inspire us to notice for ourselves and think about these moments that for us wake up that sense of wonder, especially in a time when we are being inundated with so much that's difficult. To remember that if you know to look for it, it's there for you. This is a much longer poem, and I will read it to you. This is called You Can't Have It All by Barbara Rass. I'm not actually sure how to pronounce her last name. I practiced the obviously hard to pronounce Polish name, but it didn't occur to me to double check this one before I started. And I will read this to you. This is a poem I think people might have encountered before. I don't think it's especially obscure, but it is one that I like very much. She says, you can't have it all, but you can have the fig tree and its fat leaves like clown hands gloved with green. You can have the touch of a single 11-year-old finger on your cheek, waking you at 1 a.m. to say the hamster is back. You can have the purr of the cat and the soulful look of the black dog, the look that says, if I could, I would bite every sorrow until it fled. And when it is August, you can have it August, and abundantly so. You can have love, though often it will be mysterious, like the white foam that bubbles up at the top of the bean pot over the red kidneys, until you realize foam's twin is blood. You can have the skin at the center between a man's legs, so solid, so doll-like. You can have the life of the mind, glowing occasionally in priestly vestments, never admitting pettiness, never stooping to bribe the sullen guard who will tell you all roads narrow at the border. You can speak a foreign language sometimes, and it can mean something. You can visit the marker on the grave where your father wept openly. You can't bring back the dead, but you can have the words forgive and forget hold hands as if they meant to spend a lifetime together. And you can be grateful for makeup, the way it kisses your face, half spice, half amnesia. Grateful for Mozart, his many notes racing one another towards joy, for towels, sucking up the drops on your clean skin, and for deeper thirsts, for passion fruit, for saliva. You can have the dream of Egypt, the horses of Egypt, and you riding in the hot sand. You can have your grandfather sitting on the side of your bed, at least for a while. You can have clouds and letters, the leaping of distances, and Indian food with yellow sauce like sunrise. You can't count on grace to pick you out of a crowd, but here is your friend to teach you how to high jump, how to throw yourself over the bar backwards until you learn about love, about sweet surrender. And here are periwinkles, buses that kneel, farms in the mind as real as Africa. And when adulthood fails you, you can still summon the memory of the black swan on the pond of your childhood, the rye bread with peanut butter and bananas your grandmother gave you while the rest of the family slept. There is the voice you can still summon at will like your mother's. It will always whisper, you can't have it all, but there is this. I was thinking as I read this poem that these specific kinds of poems are very often lists. They're I eliminated several poems that were functionally lists of things, and this is that. And there's an art to building a list that comes to mean something bigger than the list itself. You know what I mean? I love poetry and I love poetic language. I love the way the words and the sounds matter and create meaning in a way that isn't necessarily as true in prose. I love lines like, you can't bring back the dead, but you can have the words forgive and forget hold hands as if they meant to spend a lifetime together. I love that line, absolutely. I struggle with it. I have not turned out to be especially good at either forgiving or forgetting, but I read a line like that and I think maybe that could happen. I could do that. I love Mozart and then towels right after it. Really good towels. Indian food. Just if this were a poetry writing workshop, instead of talking about poetry and then worshiping sort of workshop, I could send you away with this poem and say, come back next week and write me a list. Write me a list, and maybe not just a lot of us have a gratitude practice, or we're supposed to. I'm supposed to be doing one right now for this program I'm in that's supposed to help with my chronic pain. And I'm just so cynical about it. I, Sue Penn, the enthusiast, I am cynical about gratitude practices. Yes, I'm grateful for the dog, and I'm grateful that I could pay the mortgage payment this month. But I can't always in my daily life, sort of get at the magic of the things that I'm grateful for, or get beyond those humdrum sort of things. So here she suggests to us that there are these things we have. She doesn't suggest that we get to keep them. The grandfather's only sitting on the side of your bed for a while. You can only speak a foreign language sometimes and have it mean something. She doesn't expect that things last forever. That's not the source of her gratitude, isn't that? And some of her things are memories. She's great. She says you can still summon the memories. The sandwich your grandmother gave you while everybody else was asleep. That's a nice memory. I didn't have that specific grandma, but that's a nice memory for me to think about too. I could easily imagine for myself moments that accomplished something similar. I remember my grandfather, when I was very small, taking me out into the woods, into his deer blind, not to hunt, but just to watch the animals come and go, for instance. So that's a thing that happened to me 50 years ago that I still have the memory of, I'm allowed to have that, even as other things. I think Czeslaw Miłosz, he did something different because he wrote a short poem that focuses on one moment. If you read Mary Oliver, she does a lot of this. She is a great poet for this kind of thing, for paying attention to this specific moment. And then you have Barbara Ross, who wants to build a poem that encompasses a great deal, because I think what she's saying is that, you can't have it all, but once you start listing it, you actually can have quite a bit. I find that, personally comforting when there are things I want that I can't have. Like right now, I can't protect my oldest child, who's 24, from 25, excuse me, from having just been broken up with by a lover. I can't make that different, and I would. And my kid, Carter, doesn't get to still have that love, but maybe eventually they'll be able to have the memory of it in a good way, even if they can't do that right now. So this poet, Ross Gay, I adore him. He is very capable. He's a Black poet, and he is very capable of writing political poems if he wants, and he's very capable of writing about anger and violence and all of that. But what he really loves to do is write about he prefers to write about joy. He has his last two books. Hang on a second. I'm trying to remember, because one of them was the last book he wrote was called, oh gosh, I'm sharing my screen, aren't I? The Catalog of Unabashed Gratitude. And the one before that was called something like, let me go back to where I'm supposed to be. Oh, no, I can't get there. I will get there. I should never click a button. There we are. And another of his books was called Something Delight. I always get them confused. But he really prefers to write poetry that is uplifting and poetry that reminds you of goodness rather than struggle. And I love this poem. It's called Sorrow Is Not My Name. And it is a poem about him remembering for himself that he has this capacity. So this is Sorrow Is Not My Name by Ross Gay. No matter the pull toward brink, no matter the florid, deep sleep awaits, there is a time for everything. Look, just this morning a vulture nodded his head. Whoops. Look, just this morning a vulture nodded his red, grizzled head at me, and I looked at him, admiring the sickle of his beak. Then the wind kicked up, and after arranging that good suit of feathers, he up and took off, just like that. And to boot, there are on this planet alone something like 2 million naturally occurring sweet things, some with names so generous as to kick the steel from my knees. Agave, persimmon, stickball, the purple okra I bought for $2 at the market. Think of that. The long night, the skeleton in the mirror, the man behind me on the bus taking notes. Yeah. But look, my niece is running through a field calling my name. My neighbor sings like an angel, and at the end of my block is a basketball court. I remember, my color's green. I'm spring.